All right. Greetings, fellow upland bird and forest conservation enthusiasts. This is Carl Malcolm, Vice President of Conservation for the Ruffed Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society, coming to you on Giving Tuesday. For those of you who have been with us for earlier sessions today, you've had a chance to hear from a couple of our forest conservation directors. We're going to keep that theme rolling this afternoon with a couple of our conservation delivery leaders from the Mid-Atlantic region. I'm going to give these gentlemen a chance to introduce themselves in just a moment. But before I do that, just want to highlight the fact that today we're trying to create some space to really open up the line of communication with our community, the folks who help make our work possible here at RGS and AWS, and also to extend our appreciation to all of you for your support for this wonderful organization and the work that we do. In terms of the lineup for today, if you're just joining us, we have a total of 6 regional breakouts where we're featuring some of our talented team, talking about successes of 2025, things that we're looking forward to in the new year ahead. And I think just as importantly, giving you all a chance to get to know some of the people here at the organization and what makes our team tick, because we do have a phenomenal community of conservation professionals and just good all-around folks in the mix. I kid you not when I say I've got 3 bird dogs sleeping around me, so I feel like I'm in the right frame of mind to be talking about grouse and woodcock. Ben, Aaron, welcome. Thanks for the work you guys do. Thanks for taking some time today.
Thanks very much, Carl. Looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you.
So for starters, I just want to give a little bit of space to you two gentlemen to introduce yourselves. We're going to have some time to talk about the work that y'all are doing. But for starters, just want to give you a chance to talk about kind of what makes you tick, what draws you to this kind of work, and also just so folks have a sense of the kind of roles and responsibilities that the two of you have supporting the Mid-Atlantic region. Ben, I'll start with you. Give us a little bit about who you are and your role with RGS and AWS, please.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So yeah, Ben Larson. I've been with RGS just shy of 5 years. Lived just north of Baltimore. Been in Maryland for about 20 years, but I grew up in North Dakota, Minnesota. Born in St. Paul, Minnesota. Grew up in Fargo. And so working for RGS had actually sort of deeply meaningful me in a way because my dad, big time hunter and fisherman. He grew up in Minnesota, Minneapolis. Passionate about fishing, hunting. So I got all that from him, hunting ducks and geese in North Dakota, pheasants. I used to hunt a lot of sharptails out in western North Dakota. Got into pheasants big time, 80s, early 90s. And then Dad was really passionate about elk hunting. So I sort of, I was really interested in hunting with him and did a lot of it. And Dad was actually I was thinking about this recently. Dad was a chapter president for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, one of the early members of Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ran a chapter in Fargo, did the banquets. He was very passionate about the conservation side of his sport and his passion. And so for me, it's sort of like rekindling and being part of that passion I've had with Dad. But then in an unusual and interesting way that probably will become a theme of the conversation, it's also sort of a way of also sort of being part and honoring my mom's interest in environmental, sort of more traditional environmental organizations and kind of approaches. She was a member of lots of the large NGO environmental organizations. So growing up, we had Sports Afield and the Nature Conservancies magazine, and I used to read them all and think they were all sort of connected, and that's maybe you'll probably see through the course of the conversation how I still sort of see things that way and like to find connections. And it's so just to bring it back to the mission of RGS, of course, is we're all about uniting conservationists, and so that sort of approach feels very like authentic and personal to me because I got that from my parents. That sort of the environmental and conservation approaches to nature. So, and just to finish up here. So, yeah, I've been in Baltimore about 20 years. Went to forestry school about 15 years ago. I went back and got a master's in forestry. Um, and when I did that, my dream was to have a job. It wasn't very clear to me exactly what it would be, who it would be with, but I just had this vision, this kind of feeling of having a job working in forest management for wildlife across the mid-Atlantic. Like I really imagined a role just like this. When I took a break in my career, I went back and got a master's of forestry about 15 years ago. So this is a really great job and role for me. So,
Forestry and wildlife across the Mid Atlantic. And here you sit as our forest conservation director for the Mid Atlantic region. Perfect fit. Um, I love thinking about language, and one word that I'm being a little provocative here intentionally, but the idea of, you talked about your mom having more of like an environmentalist bend, right? And I think that that's an interesting word because I see a lot of overlap, and I don't shy away from that word the way that I think some folks in the sort of hunting conservation space might. And I sense that maybe you don't shy away from that word as much either. It's like I I also like I consider myself sort of a tree hugger. Like you can call me an environmentalist tree hugger, that's okay. I also will be out there with a chainsaw, like cutting down some trees, shooting some grouse, eating them up, having a great time, but loving that forest, man, loving the environment, right? Like
yeah,
those things go sort of hand in glove in my
I
mind.
took my daughter out to the West Coast to see the redwoods a few years ago. You know, something I'd never done. Wanted to share with my daughter, and it was fantastic to stand back and look at those 1,000-year-old
Yeah,
trees.
those ones don't
And
need to be cut down. Some do.
some of them don't need to be cut down. That's right.
Some might.
Yeah.
So one theme, and Aaron, I want to hear from you in just a moment. But for folks out there in Crowdcast land, I've been very impressed and appreciative during our sessions so far today with folks bringing some great questions to us and also just engaging in general. So over the course of this conversation, hopefully you already have this sense. The intent here, this is going to be informal, hopefully fun and interesting. But if there are topics that you want us to touch on, if you've got questions for us, there's a little Q&A button on the right-hand side. We also have some folks who have already said a howdy in the chat function. Feel free to do that. If you want to take issue with me self-identifying as an environmentalist, for example, throw that into the mix, man. Let's have a little debate. Let's have a conversation about language and conservation. The point here is to have a good time and have a chance for all of us to get to know each other a little bit better. So, Aaron, let's hear from you. Tell us about your job. Tell us a little bit about your background. What made you decide to come aboard with RGS and AWS in your position?
Yeah, so my name's Aaron Lewis. I'm the Pennsylvania Forest Conservation Coordinator here at RGS and AWS. I'm fortunate in that I grew up in a sawmill family. So I was around the industry my whole life, working on the sawmill, stacking lumber, eventually running saws and stuff, but just learning that work ethic and learning about the resource from a very young age. So I went on to school, Penn State Mount Alto, and got my associates in forestry there, where the associates program was very hands-on from the start. It really fit what I was interested in. It allowed me to get some really great opportunities by having those core forestry classes to start. I worked in the White Mountains in New Hampshire on a trail crew. And then I worked on a TSI, a timber stand improvement crew in the Sierra National Forest shortly after all that beetle kill, so like 2015. So mostly cutting down beetle killed pines. And then I went on and got my bachelor's in forestry at Penn State at University Park. Worked after graduation, worked again in California for a forest consulting company where I was doing spotted owl surveys, marking timber, and cruising timber primarily. So I came back, worked for the family business, and then decided to try a different path. And I was able to, through connections from California, I was able to work for a consulting company in a forest consulting company in southern Kentucky, where I managed about 30,000 acres down there. And in between that time when I was in Kentucky and before moving back to Pennsylvania, my parents got a lab, and it turned out that my dad took her pheasant hunting one time, and it turned out that she has great instincts, and her name is Silva for forestry folks, like silviculture. So turns out she had great bird hunting instincts, and so when I would come home from Kentucky, I would always try to make it a point to go woodcock and grouse hunting with Silva while I was home. And yeah, so just it coming back to RGS, it really ties in my past experience in land management with the wildlife component, and working it makes a full circle between land management and wildlife habitat. So, and I want to just say too, I've got my very first grouse with Silva on Thanksgiving Day, just a couple days ago. So,
like this year.
Nice.
yeah, this year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. It's
Wow.
the tail fan is drying as we speak. So
You gotta get you need to take a quick 5 and go get that thing tacked up on the wall behind you. That's awesome,
It's
man.
not quite dry yet,
Congratulations.
but yeah, thank you. Thanks.
That's
Yeah.
great.
There's
Awesome.
thank you. I'd say my percentage of grouse being hit that I've shot at is less than 10%, but it's no longer 0%. So that's
greater than 0.
Yeah.
I've hit more than 0 of the grouse I've shot at. That's a good stat.
Yes.
One of my favorite quotable quotes from the day so far, we had Zach on earlier today, Zach Evans, our forest conservation director from the Eastern Great Lakes. And he was talking about really wanting to be a consumptive conservation user, but often not being able to shoot well enough for it actually to result in consumption, which I thought was some good, endearing self-deprecation on his part. That's sweet, man. So that was so home for you.
So yeah, home for me is Haneyville, Pennsylvania. So right along the PA wilds. There's public land. I got that grouse less than half a mile from my house. So public land has really gotten, as I've gotten a little older and traveled, public land has really been a really important staple of. It's been a foundation of really what I believe in, and being able to be in good habitat on public land is very important to me.
I love that. So based on that last comment, I'm just going to throw into the mix here on the topic of public land. One of the things that's really cool and an aspect of working for this organization that I feel really excited about is the fact that we have the opportunity to get engaged in advocacy around key issues. A lot of them relate to forestry and promoting more active management. But hopefully folks have been paying attention to some of the threats, some of the legislation that has been pursued during the 2025 calendar year. A couple of provisions, one of which was slated for inclusion in the Big Beautiful Bill, mandating the disposal of some federal lands. And there have been a lot of conservation nonprofits, just a lot of outspoken opposition, and even within the ranks of Congress, a lot of vocal leadership, thankfully, on issues like that. But that's one of the topics that, along with a coalition of other organizations this year, we've been engaged in speaking up on that. So that's not the only one. There's a lot of different topics where we're trying to weigh in and be part of those conversations. And, just tying this brief portion of our conversation back to the Giving Tuesday sort of objectives we have, one key variable in how effective an organization like RGS and AWS is when we engage in those spaces is how many members do we have? Like, that's one of the key things that folks will look at when we're submitting like a comment letter or we are joining in with other organizations as a signatory on a particular topic. And so when we think about all the reasons why our community of members and chapter volunteers and donors, why those things all matter so much, one of the many reasons is the fact that the more folks, the more voices we represent as an organization, the more effective we can be when we engage around some of those policy issues, one of which this year was the public lands topic. So Aaron, you mentioning, your own sort of awakening around public lands, I figured that was a good thing to throw into the mix there. And congrats on that first bird.
Thank
So
you. Thank
can you
you.
give us a little summary? The dog, was it snowy? Like, what was going on when you
It-
bumped into this roughie?
yeah, so we some friends and I had hunted this area with this cover before, and um, we knew there were grouse there. We knew that they knew I wasn't very accurate with a gun, so I they got that. But anyways, yeah, just going through we learned from that it wasn't snowy. There wasn't snow at that time. We have about 5 inches now, but just going through the saplings, and we knew right at the end they might hold at some laurel and a pine, and sure enough, actually three flushed out, and I was missed at the first one, but I was able to get another shot at another one. So yeah, it was as soon as I saw it, it was an exciting feeling. And it's
That's
in an
awesome.
area, it's like a little island surrounded by of cover of young forest, surrounded by it's about 15 years old, probably 15 or 20 years old, surrounded by an area that's been shelter wood cut. So looked like it was, so it'll be when that island phases out of good grouse habitat, hopefully the surrounding area will have good regen that it can be young forest.
Love
So
it.
that was
You're,
place to
you're
go.
getting you're getting some love in the chat here. You've got
I
congrats
see
to
that.
you and
Thank you,
Silva from
guys.
Emily. You'll never forget your first from David. Welcome to the addiction, Aaron from Jed. And Tom, I appreciate Tom chiming in here. He's already starting to nudge us in the direction of some lines of inquiry. So what I want to do, I want to like step out of the way and give you guys the floor here. I know you've got some thoughts on things that you want to highlight from the year in review, what's ahead of you, sort of philosophy around partnerships. And I'll just flag what Tom has thrown into the chat. Timber markets are so important to our work. I'd like to hear Ben talk about his work to expand markets for lesser quality timber. So, gentlemen, I know the two of you have thoughts to share. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, happy to talk about that, Tom. Thanks for mentioning that in the chat. Um, yeah, thanks, Carl. I sort of wanted to frame our comments. We're going to give a little profile of the work in all the states, New Jersey down to West Virginia. But I wanted to give a little overview to sort of highlight some themes, some common elements running through the work in all the states. The first of course, has to do with people. Aaron's been on the job now for about 14 months. He started early October last year. Been doing a fantastic job growing our program by leaps and bounds. Lots of key partners. He'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Crystal Johnston, our West Virginia coordinator, she's been on the job a few months less. Probably have her on next year if we do this again. She's been doing a great job, especially with the Division of Forestry in West Virginia. We've got a really good and growing collaboration with them and other partners. And then the team internally at RGS has been really great. Emily Siski, our Mid-Atlantic Engagement Coordinator, has been fantastic. Trip Way, our Development Director, been working with Trip and Emily and Aaron and Grant Earhart, our Southern Appalachians Engagement Coordinator, and Crystal, to really try to work more strategically, more sort of intentionally with our chapters. One of my favorite stories in my time at RGS, when I started in 2021, Ben Jones said to me just a month or two into the job, he said, "You really got to go and see a habitat day that the Charles Bechtel chapter puts on with the South Mountain chapter in Southeast Pennsylvania." He said, "They really got it. They understand how this whole model can work, where the chapters can work with partners and do volunteer projects in the context of landscape scale forest management that the Game Commission, Pennsylvania Game Commission, is doing. So I happily went. I went that first spring, um, and I think at that time it was the 41st or 40th annual Habitat Day that the Charles Bechtel chapter was putting on with the Game Commission. Um, and what they happened to have a member, Dave Henry, who worked at the Game Commission as a forester. And so he was the go-between between the chapter and the Game Commission to help figure out how the chapter could do a planting or pay for a road or something that would help the Game Commission do more good forest management. And so I went that first spring. I've got a picture of the chapter with a sign that the Game Commission put up. And to me, it's been a great example of the potential when the chapters and the leadership there's a habitat chair like Dave Henry who kind of coordinates work with a nearby partner. And so that collaboration's been a model. And with Lisa Rossi and Trip Way and Emily and Grant, we've been trying to build out this model across the region. We've got 35 chapters in the Mid-Atlantic. And one of the main things I've been doing with them and RGS team is to figure out how to help chapters where they're at so they can get to the point of having these really impactful habitat days. And so that's been a main priority in the region, and that's a big part of the team that we're kind of pulling together is our chapters and members and volunteers and the RGS engagement, development, conservation delivery staff. So they've been great, definitely. And then external partners, I can't say enough that having external partners is just so critical. When I was listening to Zach and Sarah this morning and sort of remembering what it was like starting out for me 4.5 years ago. And I remember feeling kind of lonely because I didn't really know there was all these states, and like, what am I going to do across all of these states? And now, about 5 years later, I have all these webs of connections and community around the agencies and local consulting foresters and the mills and so it's this sort of feeling of being deeply connected and engaged, and that's because of the external partners. I'll get to Tom's question in a bit about the markets. The markets are a key piece, kind of an enabling condition, but it's all the foresters and the landowners, the public and private land managers, landowners, and all of those people are just key. Of course, we don't own any land, right? Somebody was asking this morning about could RGS own land, and maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe there's a model in the future, but currently we don't own any land. So any land management we help is sort of secondary, right? We work with a land manager, landowner to help them implement the land management and help them attain their goals. So having those partners, private landowners, consulting foresters, Aaron can talk about our consulting forester program and private landowner program in Pennsylvania. But it's all part of this kind of network and matrix of influence and collaboration. And then the last thing I was going to mention is markets. I'll talk more about this right now, Tom. So markets are really key to our model. When I started, one of the first things I did was try to figure out what to do with a couple of mulchers that we had in West Virginia. Everyone's probably familiar with a forest mulcher. It's like a small skid steer with a big grinding head, kind of like a rototiller, but for trees and brush. Very effective if you've got a small area to work in and there's no market. You just want to do a small amount of habitat management. But very expensive to operate, hundreds of dollars per acre, thousands of dollars per day. And the maintenance on those things, boy, that's really expensive. So we were able to donate the machines and shift more to a model of working forest land. So a great example in West Virginia is with Crystal Johnston in the Monongahela National Forest. We sold a stewardship sale, 147 acres of clear cuts. There was, almost a couple $100,000 of revenue from that timber that was sold. And that, through a stewardship agreement, was plowed back into RGS staff time and then additional work on the national forest. So we went, if we were going to pay out of pocket for 147 acres of clear cuts with a mulching machine, I mean, it would be tens of, I mean, probably would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you'd waste all that timber. So working and orienting around commercial timber sales, and when I say commercial timber sales, I don't mean timber sales where the goal is to make money. I mean timber sales where there is a sale of products that have commercial value. The work we do is good forest management that happens to produce saleable pulpwood or saw timber. So that's always the goal, is ecological forest management. And it's especially strategic when it has a market and there's a sale of products to help cover the cost of the landowner, land manager, partner, and so on. Anyway, so Tom's question, I'll dive into that now because markets are definitely a key piece. Aaron was talking about it earlier. He's got this in his bones. I'm a more latecomer to forest product markets, but I do have a family connection that maybe I'll talk about later. So before RGS, I worked at a large pellet manufacturer. They make industrial scale pellets. They make them in the Southeast US and they ship them to power plants in Europe and Asia. And so they were buying hundreds of thousands of tons of pulpwood, pine and hardwoods pulpwood per year for every plant. And they had 7 or 8 plants when I was there. So millions of tons of pulpwood purchased every year to make wood pellets. That was a tremendous opportunity, that long-term stable market. So I worked with Enviva to help connect their procurement foresters to the folks in Sarah's region and others that are trying to sell low quality pine and low quality hardwood to restore longleaf or restore bottomland hardwood stands. To get fire back into a longleaf stand, you got to often reduce the amount of midstory, reduce the amount of small trees and brush. Otherwise, you could have a catastrophic fire that would get into the canopy and kill the longleaf pine. So tremendous opportunity, and we really realized that a lot of that at Enviva. Got to the point actually where our CEO, had an annual longleaf restoration goal in his list of 10 or 15 goals that year for the entire company. He had a number of acres that he wanted Enviva to help restore through their purchasing and conservation investments. So with RGS, I've been really pleased to work with Domtar. Domtar has a large paper plant up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and they are interested in working with us so we can help tell the story to their stakeholders about how their buying pulpwood helps improve forests for ruffed grouse, for woodcock, and lots of other wildlife. That's a story that maybe some in the environmental community don't really understand, haven't really heard. And it helps to have a conservation organization like us tell that story with really concrete examples. That's the thing I think we're going to get to at Domtar is, have stand level examples of how their purchases of pulpwood helped improve forests for wildlife, but also helped improve forests for good forest management. So we're doing some other projects too, but the partnership with Domtar is probably the one I'll mention. But we also have some good markets down in Western Virginia, in Covington, Virginia. Smurfit Westrock has another large plant. They make corrugated material, corrugated boxes for Amazon and others. They also buy a tremendous amount of low quality saw timber, pulpwood, and really help implement forest management across much of West Virginia and a lot of sort of central Virginia. So anyway, great question, Tom. A lot more we can do. One project that I've been really pleased to work with Audubon Mid-Atlantic and 3 firewood processors in Pennsylvania is we're trying to displace a lot of the kiln-dried imported firewood. I don't know if folks have seen, like outside of Lowe's or Home Depot, grocery stores, especially on the eastern seaboard here, there's a lot of imported kiln-dried firewood from the Baltic states. And that's crazy. We've got a lot of firewood processors here in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, other states, New York, that have kilns and are looking for increased markets. So they're smaller scale markets. A saw timber, a firewood processing is a relatively small plant, but they're widely distributed across the landscape. So it can help with a lot of different projects around a region. Anyway, so why don't I pause there, and we can dive into the states, so I can kind of give more details around the state work. But maybe there are other questions, Carl or Aaron, if you want to add to what I was saying, that'd be great too.
Yeah, we have worked. Then you covered it really well, and I could dive into it a lot further than we need to. It could take up a long time, but yeah, we've been able to really establish this connection. I like to think of us as like we work with everyone. We work with the industry and we work with the land managers, and we try to fill in the gaps for where what land managers are missing to meet like their goals. And if we can work with industry to fill in that gap, whether it be constructing a road or sweetening the pot, some like just having a logger that's coming in and cutting timber, helping keep that job commercial by paying them to cut a little bit more. That's what's scalable. Um, and that's in my mind. But I've been fortunate to work with both of those to kind of get those relationships and work on that.
So I'll mention here again. Appreciate the question from Tom on expanding timber markets. Definitely have space if folks have other questions they want to bounce off of Ben or Aaron here today, or just share updates on your own grouse hunting season, your woodcock season, anything you want to throw in the chat. We're interested to hear from you all as well. So Ben, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks. So what I was going to do is spend a few minutes per state. We've got New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia in the region. So I was going to just spend a few minutes talking about some projects, including our chapters in our various states. Again, you'll see those themes of the collaboration, and the people and the markets. So I was going to start with Maryland. I live just north of Baltimore. I've been here about 20 years. And when I started about 5 years ago, I kind of focused first on West Virginia and Pennsylvania. They have more active forest management. There's more markets. But it's been really nice the last couple of years. I like to tell this story because I think it indicates how organic these kinds of collaborations and progress can be, maybe needs to be. I think it was 2 summers ago, I went to a Quail Forever in the Maryland DNR, Tall Timbers, and some other partners were holding a sort of a early successional habitat event at a nearby wildlife refuge, the Patuxent Research Refuge. They filled the room. It was an amazing turnout. They had lots of private landowners, agency partners, and they were really celebrating and sharing their success they'd had over the past 3-4 years, developing an approach, a coalition, if you will, collaboration around quail habitat, especially in Maryland and Delaware. And I was just thrilled. We had a couple of members there. The leader of our Central Maryland chapter was there. A couple of leaders of our Central Maryland chapter were there. I stood up and said, "Hey, this is fantastic. We need something similar on the forest side because we've got a lot of forest wildlife, including lots of neotropical songbirds, game birds, forest game birds that are in trouble. We need habitat diversity in the forested parts of Maryland as well." And it's been really, really great to see a very effective and growing collaboration. I think we called it something like the Maryland Forest Diversification Collaboration. Western Maryland, we've got the Nature Conservancy. Audubon Mid-Atlantic is kind of a part of it. Tall Timbers over on the Eastern Shore. Maryland Forest Service has been huge. Maryland DNR. And we've been really growing out this collaboration, realizing, in Maryland, like in other states, how much overlap we have between the organizations. Um, there's a lot of forest threats out there these days, and a lot of consensus, probably far more consensus around the need and the urgency to improve forest habitats in the Central Appalachians, other regions, than people might know. Um, so the Maryland Forest Service went out and got a $500,000 grant from the U.S. Forest Service to help us plan dynamic blocks in 3 parts of Maryland, one in Western Maryland, one in Southern Maryland, one on the Eastern Shore. I've been really fortunate to work with Quail Forever. Quail Forever's Volunteer of the Year, Eddie Beck, is a Marylander. He helped pull together a collaboration in Southern Maryland. I said, "Hey, Eddie, I'm a full-time staff person. I can help coordinate this collaboration so you don't have to convene all the monthly meetings." So that's been really good. Um, and we're now really pleased that the Maryland Department of Agriculture has actually gotten some money to support forest management on working lands on farms in particular. A lot of forest land on farms around Maryland. So they got a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's Chesapeake Wild Program. So we're going to be helping some private landowners implement some good management through collaboration with the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So it's really a robust, growing collaboration in Maryland. We've got a new chapter. We've got a rejuvenated Central Maryland chapter. They're very active, very, very effective. They're sort of my local chapter, so it's been fun working with them. And with Emily, we've been working to start a Delmarva AWS chapter. So I think that's going to get off the ground. Got some great collaboration, some great local folks. And I've been working a little bit in Delaware and then down in the Eastern Shore of Virginia. So that's the Delmarva, the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia peninsula. So yeah, it's been really fun to grow that in Maryland and Delaware, and it kind of expands on the work that our South Jersey AWS chapter with Mark Dreyfus. He's been doing a great job for years, just up north across the mouth of the Delaware in New Jersey, southern New Jersey. Mark's been working with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. He's been doing great work with the chapter, sort of volunteer plantings, some non-commercial habitat management through New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. And so we're expanding that collaboration with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. Maryland Forest Service got a grant with the Delaware and the New Jersey Forest Service. We're going to get into Atlantic white cedar restoration, which is a relatively lesser known forest type, but I think it's going to be a great woodcock habitat because they grow on muck soils, non-tidal, non-saline muck soils, and the regeneration of Atlantic white cedar is, historically was from hurricanes coming in and wiping out a stand, and then you get all the light on the ground, and then you get, tens of thousands of seedlings growing back, or you have a catastrophic fire that comes in and replaces the stand. So natural regeneration of cedar creates good woodcock habitat. So we're working with some foresters in New Jersey and others to support more of that forest management to get Atlantic white cedar restored. And now working in Northern Jersey, we got some members who are interested in starting a North Jersey AWS chapter. So it's very exciting. It's actually, we've got a new AWS chapter in the eastern part of Virginia as well. Chris down in the kind of just north of where Sarah served our Piedmont and Coastal Plain Forest Conservation Director. So yeah, it's a very fun matrix having the chapters and the partners and the foresters and so that's where Aaron kind of fits in, because when Aaron started about a year ago, it was fun. I love this story, Aaron. I've told this many times. Aaron's first day was in early October, And we'd been talking with a couple habitat chairs in Pennsylvania about some additional state forests that they wanted to work with. I had some money through a couple of different sources to do some habitat work around Harrisburg, both on the west side of the Susquehanna and the east side of the Susquehanna, with the Nature Conservancy and the Game Commission and Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry. And so Aaron came that day in October, just over a year ago, to a meeting where we had all these partners pulled together to think about what additional work we could do in that geography. So he was thrown right into the mix of these agency people and Nature Conservancy and others. And it was really great because he saw the sort of life cycle of a grant. Okay, we got a collaboration on the ground, doing landscape scale, kind of strategic work. We want to get some more money, get the partners together. What sort of needs do you have? What sort of projects? And then we kind of shoehorned that into the grant proposal that I was really glad to get through the U.S. Forest Service. And Aaron's been doing that kind of thing in other geographies with other partners and across Pennsylvania. So it's been really fun to have Aaron on board, and he's done a great job growing the program. So you can dive in, Aaron, and tell more of the details about some of the projects you've been working on.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I will say on that first day, it was fun to watch how the conversation went from Ben saying, "Hey, this is what we want to do," and then the wheels were turning in the foresters and land managers' heads, and then they started saying, "Well, we have some work we could do out on this ridge, or this stand, or some, or they had." And as a land manager in previous role, you have areas that you think, man, one day it'd be really fun to do this project, but you aren't as fortunate as some of the foresters were that day, where someone said, "Hey, let's do a project together." So it was cool to watch that. So in Pennsylvania, I want to start with saying we have 14 chapters in the state, and they're really the foundation of our work. Although grouse are really in mostly the northern tier, maybe down into the Laurel Highlands of the state, for those familiar, or for those of you unfamiliar with Pennsylvania's geography, most of the population is in the south, southeast. Then north it's a lot of forest land, a lot of state forests, there are some timber investment groups as well. But Pennsylvania has a hunting camp culture that although the population is in the south, a lot of those folks go to a hunting camp in the northern tier, which I think is pretty cool. And it really shows it. Some of our projects in the northern tier get a lot of excitement from habitat chairs throughout the state. I want to briefly talk about one project we had that really summed up how Rough Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society can work, and how we can have such a grassroots effort to get habitat work done. We have a member, Matt Null, in the central part of the state, and he knew where there was an isolated population of grouse on, well, I won't even go on a state forest, and he knew that their habitat was going to eventually grow out. So he set up a meeting where I had just been working at RGS for a couple of months, and I met with the state foresters and Matt, and he explained to them that, hey, we have a small, but a grouse population on this isolated ridge in the state. How can we help this population? And first of all, the foresters were excited to hear that there were grouse in a region that is not well known for grouse, not the northern tier, I'll say that. So because of our active member, we've been able to work with their forester, and now we have a project going together where there will be some herbaceous openings, but a lot of young forest stand will be created, and it'll offer some connectivity to other stands that are young on neighboring game lands and across the ridge. We've even been able to get another nonprofit involved, so they've been able to chip in some funding as well to help with this project. But it's a testament to how the our partners. When I mentioned partners of state forests and industry, I would also say our memberships are a very important part of that partnership, because they're the ones that are out there going through the habitat and getting an idea of what the numbers of grouse and woodcock are. So that's just a really fun project that we're working on, because I could talk the rest of this conversation about what we have going on in Pennsylvania, because there's a lot of exciting things. And I guess one thing I also want to talk about is our work on the Allegheny National Forest, because this really excites me. It's public land that has a historical camp, grouse camp culture to it, hunting camp, grouse camp culture to it. And where we get to step in is we get to help them improve their habitat improve their early successional habitat, increase their early successional habitat numbers. And we've done that through administering projects. My background working with loggers, working with contractors, I've been able to set up a good system where we can work with a contractor, and I do the inspections and make sure we meet all the specs for the National Forest to a T, and limit any kind of questionable measures. Like, everything is quantitative, and we've also worked with consultant foresters to help us meet those needs, meet those quantitative metrics as well, because we have a project where we need to do a lot of plots to make sure the contractor is cutting all the stems that are needed. And we work with a consultant forester who has the technology and they just have the system to do a lot of plots in a day. So connecting that national forest and then the contractor in with the consulting forestry side of things has been exciting. Yeah, and to talk about some of those projects, and I bring this up quite a bit. The project I was talking about is a site prep project. So you would go in there and see what we've helped work on, and you would probably say, this is not grouse habitat. This is 30-inch oak trees. But we want early successional habitat, but we need to do it. We want to do it sustainably. So under those oak trees were a bunch of 2 to 8-inch birch that came in the mid-story. If and when those oak trees either died or are cut, then all you would have is an older birch stand. So the National Forest wanted us to help administer the contractor to make sure that those birch are wiped out. And although it's not goat grouse habitat now, hopefully the regeneration will be established, and it will be another oak forest. But it takes time. It takes a lot of effort to do these projects.
Aaron is being very modest. He's done a great job implementing the first couple of projects we have with ANF, and the ANF has been very, very pleased and impressed, to the point they're now talking about 10 years of collaboration at a much larger scale. So Aaron has taken a initial collaboration. We're kind of feeling our way together to let's go kind of collaboration. So
Thank you.
Can you speak for a few minutes about the Forester Apprenticeship Program that you're building in Pennsylvania, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an exciting program that we're working with Audubon Mid-Atlantic and the Finley Center for Private Forest Lands. They're based there at an affiliate of Penn State. There is a lack of, in Pennsylvania, there's a lack of high quality consulting foresters, and because of that, we want to increase the capacity of consulting foresters. So how we can do this is we're going to have 6 interns in 2026, and then 6 interns in the summer of 2027 that will work directly under consulting forestry companies that have applied. They've gone through a process to be applied and vetted for to have these interns. And what we wanted to make clear, and what one of the consultant foresters brought up, was these interns are not summer labor. They are not going to go on the herbicide crew and spray herbicide for 50 hours a week. what they will spray herbicide, hopefully. That'll hopefully be part of it, but they'll also mark timber. They'll also cruise timber. They'll help write management plans. They'll mark boundaries, do all the things that are very difficult for a young professional, young forester to get involved in when they're first getting their first job. So they're going to, which is their first job is typically being part of a labor intensive crew. So they're going to get to see a suite of different types of work, habitat work, and they'll also get to see the different cost share programs that are available for private landowners, non-industrial private landowners. Things that I didn't know about until I was well into my career. These cost share programs include NRCS. They include some funds from the state of Pennsylvania, and we will also help share costs on private lands for non-industrial private landowners, because 70% of Pennsylvania, Penn's woods, are privately owned forest lands. So how we've worked with consultants that have clients, or we've helped establish clients and set them up with consultants that we will help fund habitat improvement work that is within a certain distance of current work we have. But
Yeah,
it's all connected.
it is all connected. And Aaron's done a great job building that out. He's a perfect person to do it, having himself gone through a 2-year program in Pennsylvania and then go to Penn State. And I just really wanted to emphasize that the money for this project was raised by a partner. Audubon Mid-Atlantic actually wrote the grant, wrote us in to essentially build out this apprentice forester program with grant monies that they raised from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to address a common challenge. You know, the lack of good consultants to work with private landowners is one of those things that foresters complain about. It's almost as big of a complaint as the lack of markets. But with our partners and with a funder, we're able to do something about it. And it's particularly helpful because we're going to help expand the capacity of really great consulting forestry firms that we've been working with for years in Pennsylvania, and train a bunch more young foresters who can hopefully go into forestry in Pennsylvania, maybe as a consultant working with private landowners. And Aaron's doing a fantastic job growing that out. So I think it's going to become a signature program for us in Pennsylvania and maybe even in other states. So it's great to see you build that, Aaron.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So just got a few minutes left. I did want to mention our work in Virginia and West Virginia as well. And then maybe there'll be some other questions or comments we can get to. So Virginia, been working a lot with the George Washington and Jefferson National Forests. We actually have a former RGS forester who's now silviculturalist at the George Washington Jefferson National Forest. Charlie Fair has been working with Charlie to set up a partner forester position with the GWJF. Charlie's really good about writing good plans, projects that can get implemented, to implement landscape scale management, cut through NEPA. So we're going to help expand Charlie's capacity, get more projects through the planning process. And we're also doing more work with Virginia DWR. Our coordinator in West Virginia, Crystal, is actually going to be working on a wildlife management area where they're actually trying to increase the amount and quality of old forest conditions. This is a collaboration that my colleague Sean and the Southern Appalachians helped set up and fund. So we're going to not just work on young forest in this case, but we're going to help actually do some active management to recreate older stand conditions, more structural diversity, small gaps, that kind of thing. And look to do a lot more work across Virginia over the next few years. So I'll wind up in West Virginia, where our coordinator, Crystal Johnston, she's been extremely effective with lots of partners. Crystal's very well connected to the forestry community in West Virginia. She's implemented our project, Forest Stewardship Project on the Monongahela, the Beulah Wildlife Management Project. That was actually a project that my predecessor, Linda Ordaway, helped conceive. Um, and we've actually been working a lot with West Virginia Division of Forestry over the past couple of years. It turns out there's a lot of interest around prescribed fire in West Virginia. There's sort of a growing acceptance, support, implementation of prescribed fire. So we were really pleased to get some money, again, from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to help the West Virginia Division of Forestry do a couple of larger burns on a couple of state forests in eastern West Virginia. Um, Probably the Nature Conservancy's fire crew will implement that work. Um, and it's really a great sort of expansion of our collaboration with the Division of Forestry in West Virginia. I was down there a couple of weeks ago to look at some management they've done at one state forest. Um, and you'd swear that what they were doing over the last 10 years is exactly what RGS has been recommending in our dynamic forest blocks. They talk about a shifting mosaic of young forest habitat. Um, so really a great collaboration, lots of room to grow that. And it's really cool for me too, because we've got a fantastic chapter president in Southwest West Virginia, a tri-state drumming feather chapter, Dale Perry. He's been working with state forests and wildlife management areas and energy companies and just being very creative and effective, putting together collaborations, getting things funded. Um, and so in a way, we're sort of helping expand a collaboration, a conversation that Dale started with Cowboy Lingo State Forest. So hugely fun to be part of the mix and help people like Dale Perry do more good work.
So, gentlemen, you've covered a lot of ground in terms of state by state updates. Obviously, a lot of wonderful things happening across the map for the Mid Atlantic region. And at the end, there have been highlighting some of the contributions coming from the chapters. So, as we put a bow on this hour together and get ready to shift to another region, could you gentlemen just talk a little bit about the importance of the contributions that are coming, both financial and in terms of time and attention and energy, from our chapter volunteers, from our membership, and from our donors? Like, how is that impacting your ability to deliver work on the ground? Why is that so important?
Well, just to say more about what Dale is doing in Southwest West Virginia. Um, I mean, he's out there talking to partners, agencies, um, finding opportunities to help implement more management on state land. That's fantastic. It's Trip Way talks about our members and our habitat chairs in particular being sort of force multipliers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the greatest things I think about working at RGS is we have 35 chapters across the Mid-Atlantic, and all of them have really dynamic, intelligent, engaged, um, passionate people, and they all have their own Rolodexes and their own life experiences. And when they start thinking about how they can help RGS, they remember that they know somebody at a gas pipeline company, and they
Mm-hmm.
set up a meeting so we can ask the gas pipeline company for a small grant. Or they know somebody who works in the state or federal agency, or they know somebody who can donate stuff for the banquet, um,
Mm-hmm.
or they have a higher level connection with a major donor or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's that sort of mix of their passion, their connections, their history, their knowledge. Aaron was mentioning earlier that our members know their local areas really, really well. That's invaluable. I can't know 5 states closely or intimately. Um, so having members who can say, you should go see this WMA over on the eastern shore of Maryland because the manager there has this really innovative way of managing um, for woodcock, you know. And so you do, and then there's a fantastic collaboration that comes out of that. So
Mm-hmm.
that sort of engagement and energy. A little bit more tangible example. This collaboration we're working on in southeastern Pennsylvania around Harrisburg. The chapter habitat chair Dave Henry was talking to the Game Commission. The local Game Commission staff didn't have money in their budget for a access trail, an ATV trail, so the contractor could get up and do some herbicide work and help prepare a stand for some management. So, working with the chapter president, he said, "Hey, we'll kick in. I don't know. I figured it was like $6,000 or $7,000 of reserve funds." I said, "Hey, I'd love to match that with drummer funds." So now we have the kind of germ
Mm-hmm.
of a great collaboration. I used those $13,000 or whatever it was as match toward a two or three or a $500,000 grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that no matter what party is in the White House or is in Congress, they all like to see local involvement. They
Mm-hmm.
all like to see that there are local residents involved in not just benefiting from a project or a grant, but actually helping to plan it.
Yep.
Um, and so when I could write in the grant proposal that our chapter worked with the Game Commission regional staff, planned this project, we funded it, and what we're going to do on the forest management side is going to build on that collaboration and grow the impact. That's a it's not just a good story, but that's actually great conservation work.
Mm-hmm.
Like it leads to more forest management at scale, that's sort of more sustainable financially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the thing that really excites me is seeing how chapter membership and donations and volunteerism can line up to really grow our impact and make us much more helpful in terms of creating management, creating habitat.
You bet. So that theme where I want to close us off today, and we're going to shift over to our Southern Appalachian region here in just a moment. But that idea of work at scale, that's something that I just want to really underscore. And I mentioned earlier, I'll mention it again now. This past year, we surpassed the 500,000 acres of habitat improved mark as an organization. You'll see that in the president's message in our most recent, the winter editions of our Covers magazine. So check that out. But whether it's through donations, whether it's through memberships, whether it's the work, the incredible contributions of our chapter volunteers with banquets and all the fundraising happening at the local level, being able to take that money. Ben, you called it the germ, right? Like the small seed that we can multiply many times over through those partnerships and be able to get work done, not at the scale of 5 or 10 or 100 acres, but we're talking thousands, tens of thousands, or now we're starting to measure in terms of trying to close in on our first 1,000,000 acres. So the two of you are doing a tremendous job in the Mid-Atlantic region. Really appreciate your leadership. Aaron, it's awesome to see everything you're able to do with your focus on Pennsylvania. Your roots with you and Silva hunting those roughies up, man. That's great.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join for this portion of the agenda. We're going to shift gears now and hear some updates from the Southern Apps. So Ben, Aaron, thanks again. Hopefully folks can stay tuned and hear from a couple more of our conservation leaders here at RGS and AWS.
Thanks,
And please
Carl.
take a moment,
See you.
follow the link,
Thank you.
and get a membership for a friend, make a contribution. We'll put those resources to great use. Thanks everybody for being with us on Giving Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.